Hey there, welcome back to Ask Amy. Before I get into today's question, I just want to remind you about the free class that I'm teaching tomorrow called Thriving in Times of Challenge and Change. And it's all about really what we can see, what any of us can come to see that can help us through anything, especially change, especially uncertainty, especially times that are tough. And I'll talk a lot about things that are happening kind of globally because there is a lot going on globally that weighs on us. Things like war and uncertainty and economic issues and social issues, human rights issues. This stuff weighs on us. We feel it. And part of that is just being a normal human being, and we're going to feel that. But there's also a whole lot that we can really come to see, and a whole different place that we can ground ourselves in, that helps us just be with this stuff in a remarkably different way. I mean, honestly, your experience of these things, challenge and change, can be so different. So that's what I want to share in this class. I just want to talk about what change coaches know, what people who go through the little school of big change start to see, like what there is for any human being to know and to see that can help you withstand anything. So I will put the link here in the comments to where you can register for that free class. And we will be sending the recording to everyone who's registered. So my question for today is from Stacy. Stacy says, I have some beautiful friends and they're the kindest people. However, they're struggling with a grown son, struggling with addiction for the second time after being clean for a good few years. He now has a wife and kids. There's so much sadness. Last night at dinner, I said, you can't take on his sadness. And they responded, but when it's your kids, you do. How would you respond to this? It kind of stopped me dead in my tracks. She says, I told them also to keep his beauty and the good days alive, seeing him shining bright, because if they don't, as his parents, how can he? So I love this question, and thank you for sending it, Stacy. And I think there's so much in this. Okay, so the first thing, of course, it definitely feels like what your friend said, when it's your kids, you do. Like we can see it from the outside, like you can't take that on for them. And we can see the value in seeing, anyone can see this for other people, the value in seeing someone's health and them staying clear and hopeful and positive. And yet we also know the flip side. It does feel like, well, when it's your kids, you just do. And I think the way they said that, at least in how you portrayed it in your question, is really telling, because that is how it feels. It just feels like, well, of course you do. Of course you take on your kid's pain. Of course, we've heard this many times, right? Of course you're only as happy as your least happy child. This feels like such an of course sort of thing. And I think that's a massive misunderstanding. It's a very well-meaning one, but it's something that we fall into that we don't have to. So when we feel the sadness for someone else, when your child is struggling with an addiction and you are feeling the heaviness and the sadness of that, of course, in a sense, because anyone we care about when they're struggling, what happens is our mind is being very creative, trying to comfort us. Our mind is just constantly coming up with memories and predictions and stories and in showing us images and giving us solutions or proposed solutions to what looks like a problem. This is its job. When someone we love is suffering, we are just filled with this flowing, fluid movement of, again, pictures and stories and predictions and problem solving. And we feel that. We feel it as it's moving through, and it will feel like fear and sadness and worry and all of the things that it feels like. But I think it's super important to see it the way I'm saying it. I'm describing how this process works, because what you can start to see in this is that this isn't about a son who has a drug addiction. This isn't about him or his future or his family. When we're the parents, let's say, in this scenario, and we're feeling this sadness that we feel like we can't help but carry around and live within because of what our son is going through, what we are truly feeling is not our son's pain. It is not his sadness. It is not his future. What we're feeling is, again, like I said, our mind's just creative problem solving, rehashing, calibrating, kind of feature. This is what happens. This is what a mind does. And it's so important to just get even a very, very vague little sense of how this works, because that's where there's some freedom. It's not that it's going to stop doing this. Your mind may not stop doing that. But when you can see, oh, look, it went to a memory, and then it went to an image, and then it went to a fear, and then it went to a worry, and that's what we're living within, well, that's beautiful, because it still might be painful, but it has nothing to do with your son. You're not feeling his eventual future. No, you're feeling the creative process of a mind. You're not feeling the path he's on, or what's in store for him, or what they're going through, his family's going through, or any of that. We can't feel that stuff. We literally cannot feel that stuff. There is no eventual future. We don't know. No one knows, least of all a mind, what's in store for your son. So you're not feeling his future. You are feeling your mind creatively make up stories about what could be his future. And we know this. I know we know this on some level, but we don't feel it as if we know it. We walk around weighed down by all this heaviness and grief as if all of this has already happened. And then we think, oh yeah, it's because my son fell back into his addiction. No, your son fell back into his addiction, period, full stop. You're feeling you're feeling your imagination, essentially. And this is what worried, scared minds do when someone we love is suffering. So I hope you can feel the difference in that. Now, again, don't let your mind take it to, okay, but how do I stop it? And that's fine, but he still has this problem. Like that's how a mind will hear all of this. What's so important for you to see is that you are simply feeling memories and images and stories and projections and fears. That is the heaviness you feel. And that is a separate thing from what your dear son is actually living. We don't know what he's actually living. You don't know. You don't. You can't. We certainly don't know what's coming for him. It's impossible. Only an imagination will make that up and then give it to us as if it's inevitable. And it never is. So see if you can get that sense of that first. I think that's so huge. Two other things I want to mention about this. One is this sense of, when it's your child, you just do take it on. And I totally understand that. And you're not alone in that. We hear that all the time. There are all kinds of sayings about that. I mean, that is how it feels often. But that is something that we learn. That is not natural. There is no way that we just always take on what our children are going through. That's something that is intertwined with all kinds of beliefs and really kind of, I think, a lot of expectations and shoulds and just beliefs that get passed on about how we're supposed to feel, about what it means about you as a parent, what it means about him as your son. Somehow, somewhere along the way, we think if we aren't suffering for the people we love most, that maybe our suffering shows our love for them, which is really kind of crazy. The last thing he needs right now is you suffering. And I don't say that, you're going to suffer and that's okay. I don't want you to flip that and say like, oh, we're hurting him when we suffer. No, you're a human being. You're going to suffer at times. You're for sure going to suffer over this at times. And if not this, you're going to suffer over something else at times. That's how it works for us humans. But your suffering is not honoring him. It is not showing your love. It's not. It has nothing to do with love. It's not helping him in any way. It's not making you better parents. It's not making you worse parents, but it's not making you better parents. We just pick up all these ideas about how we're supposed to feel in certain situations, and we don't even realize that we have those ideas. So I'm not at all saying you're doing this on purpose, but I think we do that. we had some guest speakers in the Little School of Big Change recently who lost a son. It's a couple and they speak and they're amazing. They lost a son this time last year, and they were talking about, what they share is very much of like just living in now, beyond the stories, images, seeing all those for what they are, but really being in this here now. And they were sharing how just, I don't know, how resilient they've been, how much they've been able to, even in the worst thing any of us can ever imagine, the biggest grief we can ever imagine, they feel that grief. But when they aren't holding on to a story that they should still be grieving, or this is how they should feel, or because he's their son, they'll never get over it, and all of these stories, they just find themselves bounce back to peace. These are my words, not theirs, but this is what we took from them, is it's like, oh my God, when we're not holding on to how we think we should feel, peace is our natural state. Now, I think all of us, especially when something like what you're going through is going on, we bounce back to that peace. And then we say, what am I doing being happy? He's suffering. And then we put it all back on. It's like we grab this helmet of sadness and worry and we wear it thinking that's how we're supposed to feel. But again, what if the most responsible, loving thing you can possibly do for your son is to have your own clarity and your own peace of mind? And again, this is a lot easier when we remember that we don't know what's best for him or what's supposed to happen. Your mind will tell you this is horrible. I cannot tell you, it is absolutely the norm that people in addiction find some freedom and then they find their way back into addiction. And that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that's where they're destined to be or that something horrible is going to happen. Sometimes we have to fall back in that hole so that we see more. Like he clearly, there was something he didn't quite see the first time around. The first time around was amazing, but now maybe the second time around is where he gets to learn those deeper lessons. We don't know. Maybe it's the third, maybe it's the fourth. We don't know. So just let yourself not know. And in the not knowing, could this be the best thing for him and his family? Could it? We don't know. You might more easily be able to hang out in the peace of mind that's in between all the images and the fears and the predictions your mind is making. The last thing I just want to mention about this is that I think we massively underestimate other people and their resilience. So we all know for ourselves that when the hardest things in the world are happening, somehow, and we're not doing it, somehow something rises to hold us through that. I'm sure everyone listening has been in the middle of some horrible grief or fear or just a really, really tough time. And you notice yourself still like brushing your teeth or driving to work. And you think, how am I brushing my teeth right now? Like, how am I functioning? How am I going to work right now, given how I feel? Well, that's because we are lived. We have this resilient spirit that never, ever, ever dies, that never gets hurt, that never stops working for us. And even when the emotion on the surface is the worst that it can be, that resilience is always there living us. Now, we can sense this for ourselves. We forget it when it comes to other people, especially probably our children and people we love the most in life. We forget that they also have this. So we walk around in our imagination thinking, oh my God, they're suffering. How are they coping? They're never going to get through this. And we imagine, the grandkids just distraught and everyone's a mess. And that's our imagination. Now, again, I'm not at all discounting or dismissing that people go through hard times and that I'm sure your family right now is going through a hard time. But don't forget that the same resilience that gets you up and has you meeting with friends occasionally and brushing your teeth and doing all the things is alive and well in every single one of them. Our mind just doesn't let us see that. Our mind is so focused here that we forget that very often. So I hope something in this has been helpful. Again, just feel what's arising. Feel the pain and the struggle when it's arising. And ironically, when we feel what's showing up, we find ourselves bounce back to that clear peace of mind where we can be hopeful, where we can have new ideas to share with the people who need them. That's where we are most powerful, most helpful, we don't have to pull that story of, oh, I should be suffering because my kid's suffering, or I can't help it, or we don't need to pull those stories around. It's not even really how it works. Those are just beliefs, and then we start living as if that's how it works. So thank you so much, Stacy, for sending the question. I hope it's helpful for everyone, and I hope to see some of you on that free class tomorrow. Again, I'll put the link here in the comments. Have a great week, everyone.